what ingredients do we think are in a vaccine? Let's have a look at the chat. Oh, guys, you're all putting microchips. No,
Those
not until
things
we
just
think
haven't been
that way.
invented yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I find that particular theory so astonishing.
Just going to bust some myths together. So, number one, this is always the common one out there. Vaccines cause autism.
The main person who put out the paper, it was like really unfound. It was really bad paper, and loads of people tried to recreate the results. They couldn't find any kind of patterns, and it was just a load of rubbish. But ultimately, people held onto the story, right? And the story was so compelling that people kept thinking that vaccines cause autism.
It was so dangerous. Like, if you look at the uptake rates of women who go and get their babies vaccinated, this was about the MMR vaccine. The rates after this paper was published in this big scandal, like, dropped down significantly. So this like really affected the mindset of people when this was published. So this is a very naughty man, Mr. Andrew Wakefield, his name is, and he was a doctor who published a study, you can see here, in 12 children. Now, if we're talking about scientific reproducibility, 12 children really is not that many to then say, oh, I looked at 12 children and here we are, vaccines cause autism, and I only looked at 12 children. So this guy basically said the MMR vaccine, which is measles, mumps, rubella, causes autism. Now, when this was, they did some investigation and they basically found that he had basically faked his data. So he had massively, it was fraudulent, it was fake, bad science, he'd falsified the data. And also they found out that he got paid about £500,000, I think it was £435,000, by a lawyer who was trying to prove that there was a link between vaccines and autism. So a lawyer gave this man money to say, I want you to prove there is a link between vaccines and autism, and paid him to do it. So wow. The medical council obviously investigated this, and they were like, this is horrendous, fake, bad, horrible, unethical science. And they retracted the paper, which means they don't stand by the results. And this guy got his medical license revoked. So he is no longer allowed to practice as a doctor in the UK. And there have now been studies done on much more than just 12 children, on like millions of children, and there is no link between vaccines and autism. Claire has put, it's always good to question ingredients and effects of vaccination, especially when so much money is involved from big pharmaceutical companies. You know, pharma companies, they do want to make a profit, but at the end of the day, we need pharmaceutical companies to make medicine. Remember things like paracetamol, Calpol, ibuprofen, you know, chemotherapies, they are all made by pharmaceutical companies. So we need pharma companies to make medicines and to make safe medicines.
But I would also agree that it is also a good idea as a scientist to question things, and especially when there's a lot of money involved. Exactly like questioning this paper when this person was paid £435,000.
Someone's put in the chat, as a parent of an autistic daughter, this is dangerous and offensive. Yeah, it's, when I read that fact that he got paid by a lawyer to find a link, I was like, how as a scientist could you ever do this and like publish fake data? It's disgusting. So the next one we're going to bust is natural immunity is better than immunity from a vaccine. What do you think, Matt? Which one is better, au naturel or vaccine?
Actually, I don't know the answer to this. I would guess that they're roughly similar. If you're talking about like immunity once you've had an infection, probably that's going to be worse because then you're going to be vaccine's probably better actually. Okay, I'm swinging to vaccine.
So you're right, but it basically it kind of depends on the disease. So I'm going to give two examples here. So do you know what this poor baby has?
Chicken pox?
Bit worse than chicken pox.
Measles?
Measles, yeah. This poor baby has measles. Now, if we look at the stats for measles, if you would like to acquire immunity naturally from measles, there is a 1 in 500 chance of death. Okay? 1 in 500 chance you're going to die if you get measles. So that's quite high. I wouldn't want to play with that risk. But in a vaccine, there is around a 1 in a million chance you would suffer a severe allergic reaction. So really what we're talking about is, for most diseases, you're talking about the risk and the benefit. So what is the risk of severe symptoms of that disease? Do they include death, okay, or really serious long-term effects? So another vaccine we get when we're babies is Hib B. So it's a type of influenza vaccine. And here, I've just taken this from the NHS website. These are the long-term side effects you can get if you get this type of influenza that we are vaccinated against as a baby. So look, if you get meningitis caused by Hib, 1 in every 20 children with Hib meningitis will die, and you'll have long-term problems like seizures and learning disabilities. So for me, I would go for the vaccine rather than take my chances of measles death. So most of the time, these vaccines that we're given as a baby protect us against diseases that would be very dangerous to get as a baby. 1 in 500 versus 1 in a million.
Ideal.
Yeah, ideal. Next one, which is very current. The COVID vaccine was made so quickly, it cannot be safe. Matt, what do you think?
Well, going off the big nope you've got written there, I would probably say nope.
I'll rub this off.
But also talking about it being rushed through, that's just like the process that would normally take a really long time just because there's a huge queue, right? And they just like cleared everything aside like an ambulance coming through.
Yeah, so I know, like, this vaccine was made so quickly, and like how many Gryffindor points to science for what has been pulled off is insane. Like the speed at which it has been done. So yes, it was quick, but the clue is 2 things. Number 1, monies, okay? Because this was a global problem, a global pandemic, the COVID vaccine got so much funding. Like, guys, science is expensive. Science costs money. And if you've got money, you can do the science quicker. Like, the limiting factor at the end of the day is, do I have the money to do this big, expensive experiment? So because it was a global problem, COVID vaccine development got a lot of money. Funding drives science. So they could do all these cool science experiments and make it quicker. But the big thing is that the main part of the COVID vaccine had already been made and given to people. So basically, the main scaffold of the vaccine had already been given and tested. And this here, you might have seen this on the BBC News, Chad Ox1. So that is the vaccine like scaffold that was made by Oxford University. They'd already given it to humans. It's already safe in humans. And all they did was modify it to recognize the COVID vaccine. And this next diagram is quite useful. So what they did was they modified a chimpanzee virus to give us what's called a vector. So it's just an empty virus, right? And what they did was they showed that they could give that safely to people here in this paper. So we can give this empty virus to people safely and protect them from things like MERS, which is a respiratory condition. So it's all like the bulk of the vaccine had already been made years ago. Like Oxford had been researching this for like 10 years. When COVID came along, they thought, oh, let's take a bit of the COVID virus, take some of the spike protein, which is the protein on the surface of the cell, we sequence it so we know the genetic code, and then we pop it in that vector that we already made. So that's why the vaccine was super quick, because they'd already made most of it and they'd been researching this empty vector for years beforehand. So it was just kind of like they just had to modify it a little bit, really. That's why it was so quick. Someone's put they were ready to go. Yeah, literally. Like as soon as COVID hit, they were like, bam, we've got the stuff. Let's go, light speed, make the vaccine. So yeah, long story short, it was a global problem. Lots of money went into making a vaccine, obviously, and they'd already made and researched and done all the safety profiling of this empty vector before they added the spike protein.
And to a sure, that there's an interesting question about like should it all be in public hands? It's really complicated. You know, the history of privatization and capitalism and all that kind of stuff also couples itself with very rapid advances in science. So we know that the kind of system that we're running in the world at the moment that has profits linked with these things also is associated with really rapid advancement in science, but also then there's the problems that come with capitalism and private ownership and people profiteering off these things. Although I don't believe that large profits are going to be made from the COVID vaccine. I actually don't know the details about that, but I don't think that there are any companies that are going to attempt to make huge amounts of money off it, because if they did, it would look terrible for them. But yeah, it's a really interesting question, isn't it, about whether these things should be publicly or privately owned. And my instinct is that there's some kind of balance points to find between the two extremes, because the two extremes both have big problems with them.
But like Oxford is an academic research institute, so it's a university, and then we have to partner up with AstraZeneca because we need a pharma company to actually make the vaccine that was developed in Oxford. So yeah, we have to work with pharma companies to make the medicine. Otherwise, how are we going to make the medicine, guys? So yeah, that's why they made it so quickly. And the last myth: vaccines alter your DNA. Matt, what do you think?
I'm going to say no because of the theme, but also I really like that viruses alter your DNA. Or like a lot of the good things in our DNA are actually from viruses, like our ability to remember things is like hugely influenced from viruses, isn't it?
Exactly.
Anyway.
So when people are like, vaccines cause alter your DNA, I'm like, how about what happens to your DNA? Do you know what a virus does to your DNA? Like, so long story short, vaccines do not alter your DNA, but viruses do. When a virus gets inside your cell, this is your nucleus, a virus literally inserts itself into your DNA, and bits of that virus will stay there and have stayed in our human genome for millions of years. So 5 to 8% of your human genome is bits of old ancient virus DNA. How cool is that? So they've got a really long name, which is something like endogenous retroviruses. But yeah, they're basically bits of ancient virus DNA that got left in our genome thousands of years ago, which is amazing. So long story short, no, they don't alter your DNA. Viruses alter your DNA. Remember the Snapchat analogy, okay? The vaccine delivers something to your body and then it's degraded and destroyed. It doesn't hang around in your body forever. The only thing that hangs around in your body is your memory cells, your B cells, and your antibodies.
I was thinking about viruses altering your DNA and how we associate viruses with disease, don't we? And we always associate them with negativity, but ultimately a virus is just a natural consequence of, we kind of make our own viruses in some ways, don't we? Or quite often.
Like, viruses are such a good messenger as well. So like I use empty viruses in the lab, and you can basically put whatever instruction you want inside a virus, use that virus to infect a cancer cell, to tell the cancer cell what to do, because viruses are just so good at inserting themselves into DNA that we can use them to our advantage to genetically modify cells in the lab. So yeah, viruses are like, they're the world's best messenger to DNA, which is amazing.
Serious potential to be good, to be heroes.
They do. Potential to be good.